If you're serious about a music career and you want to make this, your livelihood and obviously make some money off of it and take it to the next level, you gotta be consistent and stay at it. You gotta keep releasing content. Maybe you don't want to spend as much as you did before because you don't have it, but consistently releasing music and trying to gain a fan base.
This podcast is produced by Amplitude Ventures, your partner in early stage startups.
It's time to get super practical with Jesse Flores, head of artist and label partnerships at Intercept Music, about what it actually takes to work as an independent artist today, from distribution, marketing, algorithms to creative control. If you are an artist trying to figure out how to build a real career, you are in the right space. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Sound Connections podcast. Today we have Jesse Flores in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you, Jacob. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Jesse, today I'm taking the opportunity to sort of help myself 15 years ago and really try to understand what it actually takes to break as a new independent artist in today's world of music distribution, marketing, attention. Obviously, this has changed over a while, and today we're going to be very practical about how you might go about this. And Jesse, you've broken careers for decades, been incredibly influential. But Jesse, for the people who don't know you, maybe you can describe who are you and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Jesse Flores. I'm head of artist and label partnerships at Intercept Music, which is a global music distributor for the independent artist and label community. We really pride ourselves on being on the forefront of music technology and customer service. We've been in business since around 2018, and we're about to have a great year in 2026. So it's definitely an exciting time to be independent.
Okay, so let's start there on being independent. So just to set the scene, I'll be using this example a tiny bit throughout the interview. I used to be an artist. I've removed all the music guys, so don't go look for it. But I was sort of semi serious. I was a producer and I produced my music myself. I wrote myself. I really didn't know anyone in music, so I released music, but it ended up with doing like I believe it's for 3 EPs and 2 albums. So like it was serious enough to that level, and also seriously produced and distributed. But I never really cracked the code of how to build an audience. To be honest, like I've always been a hustler. I know how to sell, but obviously 15 years ago it was limited what tools you had and knowledge you had in order to do these things. So I'm trying to use 18-year-old Jacob as an example of how I might do today, practically speaking. So, Jesse, if you were to imagine me now as a veteran producer, writing my own songs, wanting to release my music, how would you go about it today? What's the most sound way to think about your music and getting out there to maybe someday be successful?
Yeah, well, I definitely think the first thing you can do is shop around and just find the right distributor. There's so many options nowadays for an independent artist, at any level. You can choose to do it yourself, or you can find a partner like an Intercept Music or like a Virgin Music or, the Orchard, companies that offer more than just the traditional deliver your content from A to B. You can find out, what are the artists they have on the platform, that could potentially be right there alongside you on the roster. You can see where they deliver music to, who they have partnerships with, who they pitch to, and what kind of services they provide on the marketing side of things. So that's the one thing you should do is kind of pick and choose. It's like, say you want to join a new bank, same thing. You're going to vet everything out, see what they kind of offer, what their rates are, and pick the right opportunity for you. Ideally, you want to be at a place where you can have creative control. You're basically being charged a distribution fee, but everything else is pretty much on you as far as having total ownership of the masters and having creative control when it comes to picking and choosing what you want to release, when you want to release it, and just having that right distributor to be there, ideally as a strategic growth partner like an Intercept that can help you along the way with release strategy, marketing suggestions, so on and so forth.
Because let's break that down. So again, assuming that I'm really talented. Let's say I was that 15 years ago, and I obviously don't really know anyone. And I don't know where to start, but I know that music needs to go out there, and I need to somehow advertise it and market it. Like, how do you do that? Like, what are the core elements you need to know about?
So ideally what you want to do is obviously, like I said, find the right distributor. And when you do that, even if it's like a TuneCore or DistroKid, they have relationships with all the important DSPs. So this is the Spotify's, the YouTubes, the Apple Musics of the world. And a lot of times they have best practices. So even if you're just starting out and you never released any music before, you can, obviously upload your music and then pick and choose where it needs to go, what territories you want it to be in. Ideally, you want it to be worldwide, and ideally, you want it to go to all the different DSPs out there, the digital service providers, so anyone can access it. And when you do that, what you want to do is look at these best practices and just kind of say, okay, I need to build up my profile or even set it up at Apple Music, at Spotify, even though I have 0 followers, I don't have any subscribers on YouTube. This is my first piece of content I'm releasing. I wanna make sure I do it the right way. So if you follow these guidelines that a lot of these distributors have, and including Intercept, you can really start off on the right foot and start developing that audience and hopefully grow it with each successive release that you put out.
And is that, setting out your profile right and all that kind of stuff, so there's something to interact with. Like, one of the things, especially Spotify is big on this, is, like, the pitching to the editorials. Like, is that something that actually works at scale? Like, what's your experience with this?
It does. I mean, for anything you release, you definitely want to, use a Spotify pitch tool. It doesn't mean that you're going to get a playlist right away, but you got to be consistent with it. Nothing in this business really happens overnight. You got to work. It's going to take a while. You got to be relentless, and you just got to, be determined to get to certain points and set realistic goals for yourself. You're not going to get 100,000 followers overnight, but maybe if you're starting out at 0, okay, let me give me like a couple months to get to 100 followers, by putting out a single or 2, that kind of thing. Just build realistic goals with your distributor and help them. That'll help you basically achieve what you want to and grow your career the right way.
Because one of the things that, is sort of knowledge that's passed around on the internet is the way how to, let's go, activate algorithms. So, a big part of these platforms is that they suggest music to listeners. And obviously you want your music to be presented to people. Obviously the most, simple thing is someone searches your music and they listen to it. But obviously that doesn't scale very well. Like, there's a good big part of discovery and hopefully fans converting later is that they will first know that your music exists. And one of the things that we have, is public knowledge at least, is that if you can organically or semi-organically drive traffic to your content and have people interact with it, that's also what's going to hopefully serve the algorithms with an interest of pushing it even more. And this is where, marketing also comes into play. Like, what's your thought about exposing your music through paid marketing to people who either, you know, that could potentially be fans or vicinity of your music to then drive this algorithmic push? Like, is that a thing, or like, how do you think about these things?
It definitely is. I mean, I definitely think that you should use some of that on your key releases when you have a focus track or you have an EP or an album. You want to target like audiences, especially if you don't have one. And obviously your distributor can help out with that, with setting up your marketing plan and ad plan recommendations. But this is something that you do to see if there's traction on what you're putting out. If you target your music towards those like fan bases, like audiences, even geographically, in regions that you think will make the most sense, you got to see, what hits and what sticks, and you got to look at the analytics on in the metrics on your dashboard and really pay close attention to it, understand what it means, and then kind of figure out, okay, how do I use this data to figure out next steps. For my next release, if I'm getting some traction in Detroit and Chicago, I want to make sure that I'm setting up my advertising in those markets for my follow up release to see if I can grow that and expound on that. So all these type of things that you can use to augment, what you're doing and really gain exposure outside of, what you've done to this point are things that are necessary in order to really achieve growth the way you want to see it.
It's also, depending on how much you want to scale, it's an expensive approach, right? To potentially achieve growth, and you sort of at the mercy of people who curate playlists or algorithms that push songs. Like, how does that math add up? Like, how do you just think about the investment, long term, short term cost? Like, what's the philosophy behind it you suggest?
It depends. I mean, because it depends on what kind of situation you're looking for. If you're a brand new artist, it is going to be tough to get an advance or get a budget from, your label distributor to help support your music. That's why, in most cases, you kind of want to DIY it yourself, to get from point A to B. You want to build at least some type of commercial fan base at the DSPs. And a lot of us really look at Spotify, we really look at YouTube just to, quantify what kind of fan base is actually there and willing to support your releases going forward. But if you're doing it yourself, ideally, maybe what you want to do is get a publicist and a manager just to start building that team around you to kind of help get your name out there. You want to get the basics done, whether it's having a bio and having profile pics or, publicity photos done, building that story, telling your story, um, you know, uh, getting a publicist out there to kind of spread out to the masses what you're doing, with your career and why you're doing this and what's the reason before behind it and what this music really means to you and why it should resonate with your fans. So getting that budget to start is going to be tough. You might have to put in your own money to start, but if you spend it wisely and and do it the right way, you're going to see some results, and labels and distributors are going to start paying attention.
So what is an example of spending your money wisely? Like what would you say when it comes to sort of is the the quality of the ads? Is it how try to explain what that
Yeah,
means?
so it's definitely booking ads, whether it's Spotify or definitely YouTube. If you have videos, I definitely recommend that if you're a new artist, you got to shoot a visual for it, an official music video, and doing YouTube ads. I think is very important because that's where a lot of music discovery happens. YouTube and TikTok. So YouTube ads, TikTok ads, just really trying to see if there's any type of uh, you know engagement with what you're putting out there to see if it's worth it. And it might be 500 here, 200 there, less than $1,000 doesn't have to be a big spend, but you got to see if what you're doing is really resonating and gaining traction, unless you kind of, if you really want to put more money behind it.
Because when you say less than 1,000, if you asked me like 15 years ago if I had less than 1,000, I said no, but I have $50. Like how much do you actually need to effectively spend in order to have some sort of measurable outcome of that strategy?
I definitely think if you want to roll out with a focus track with an EP or album, you got to have I'd say at least $1,000 to spend, to be honest, if you're serious about it.
And and what's like, if you have it as an independent artist and you have a successful campaign where you spend 1,000, what would that potentially look like? Where would you see that have results?
Yeah, so if I had $1,000 budget, I would definitely spend maybe 2 to 300 on a publicist. Maybe depending on if you have a video, I'd say maybe 300, 400 on YouTube ads, and then the rest on like social media ads, just to kind of get the word out there, just to kind of, see if there's any type of, anybody really gravitating to what you're doing musically. And after that, you can really, I think, see, if there's any type of traction, see if there's something happening.
So basically, what you're saying is you use these ads in order to discern whether or not there's a reaction from the market. Um, let's say you have a positive or a negative reaction. Like, what's the natural next steps to such a effort?
I still think you need to be consistent. You need to keep putting out if you're serious about a music career and you wanna make this, your livelihood and, obviously, make some money off of it and take it to the next level, you gotta be consistent and stay at it. You gotta keep releasing content. Maybe you don't wanna spend as much as you did before because you don't have it, but consistently releasing music and trying to gain a fan base, live performances. If you're an artist that's performing, you got to get on some of these platforms where you can actually perform and see if you can get a fan base there. Maybe it's not resonating on like Spotify or Apple Music yet, but maybe if you're on a platform where you can perform and get some traction there, that might be the way to go. There's different ways to get different revenue streams out there, but yeah, I think just giving up after one or two after not really seeing the results you want is not the way to go either.
Mm. I think one thing that's really important to for us is to understand that there is many different ways to become popular. The one thing is streaming services. Like this is an older band, but I it's not that old. So I work with a band where I've sort of been helping them on off like manager-ish style. And they have on a good month maybe 10,000 monthly listeners. Which is, in the age of streaming, really not that much. And they stream perhaps like 500,000 streams per year, which is not that much either. But they release a show and they sell 1,000 tickets like this. So there is many different ways to be popular. There's many different ways to build up an audience. Like, what do you believe is the most viable path to explore these different options? Like, do you see any artists where breaking live, breaking community is the best strategy to run streaming, or like what do you see of trends happening?
It varies. I definitely think that one thing that all artists should do, especially if they live in like the United States, is network. Get out there and go to like events and conferences because if you're an artist you want to sign to a performing rights organization like a ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC. A lot of these companies have different events and conferences every year, so if you're an artist just starting out, you want to learn, so you want to go to these events, meet people. You never know who you're going to meet out there. Sit down and listen to the panels, and network, just kind of see what's out there and see what you gravitate towards. Maybe it is live performance, maybe it is really focusing on creating content for social media, or maybe it's just creating, content for all the DSPs out there, musically. But I mean, it's just a variety of ways that you can find out what makes sense for you, and attending a lot of these events and getting out there, meeting people, is definitely a plus, and something that I think all artists should do.
To talk about Intercept Music for a second, then you guys are focusing on the independent market, and find that interesting enough to build something ambitious in that space. Like, what is it about that space that makes it interesting enough for you guys to pursue it that fully?
It's just an exciting time to be independent. What we're doing is really providing a service for independent artists and labels. It's a passion of ours. We have a really great team around us of music industry professionals on staff with experience at companies like, UMG, EMI, Amazon Music, Ingrooves, Virgin Music, and having that experience on priceless. We're lucky to have that personnel here at Intercept, and we want to serve our partners, whether it's an artist, whether it's a label, help them, grow their business and being a strategic growth partner. One of our mantras is rise above the noise. How can we help build an artist audience and convert a casual listener into a follower and then into a super fan? When we're looking at artist insights and analytics dashboard, really interpreting what that is saying, and here's the data, here's what it means, here's what we recommend doing next. Also encouraging creative empowerment. So we tell our artists and label partners, you guys have to control creatively. Let's help you devise that release strategy and provide you the tools with to market your content. So providing marketing recommendations, ad plans, social media, and YouTube audits. All this can be done within our console, actually. So we have a dashboard that's second to none. So we felt there was a need out there, for this type of company, and we're there to serve our client base and help them take their careers to the next level.
What is it, in your opinion, that's so important about creative control and having that value that you keep versus selling it away? What is it that is so attractive for that?
I mean, if you're an artist or a label, I mean, you definitely want to own your masters. You want to have the total rights, ownership. You want to have creative control to make the decisions. It's just about finding that right partner that can help you augment what you're already doing. So, gone are the days of the record labels where they're the gatekeepers, and they have access to everything. It's the big machine, and you got to go to them for everything. You can do everything yourself now, and a lot of times, major labels now are doing license deals where, they're not signing an artist to a traditional record label where they're just getting a royalty. The artist actually has ownership now. So there's just value in that. And, the reality is independence is the way to go nowadays. If you look at the yearly revenues, I want to say like almost 50% of all revenue generated in the music is coming from an independent label or distributor, which is amazing. So we want to keep that trend going, and, be right there when it comes to having a premier partner. When it comes to distribution, Intercept Music is being mentioned along with the ADAs and the Orchards of the world.
So, to play a tiny bit devil's advocate on that statement, even though I agree in the general sentiment, then the big part of being a part of the major label still, or being signed to a label, not, DIY distribution is the help you can
Mhm.
get in person by experienced personnel. And I believe, like yourself, that there's sort of technology solutions that are close to that relationship, traditional relationship that can help you there. But there still misses this sort of human connection. There's an office I can go to. There's an A&R I have. Like, you believe that has lost its validity, or is like a dynamic change? Like, what happened there that sort of devalues from a macro perspective the way that you're talking about it?
That's a great question. I think dealing with the pandemic, it kinda change the perception of the whole office situation when it comes to a major label. That is different now because, a lot of times when we are working in front of the computer, but at the same time, I'm hearing a lot of artists that are, signed to a label or a major distributor, they're having a hard time, getting an email back or just getting a call back or just contacting somebody. That's why at our company, we really prioritize, customer service. You got to be able to respond to people within 24 hours. You got to be able to be there for them when they need you because a lot of times they're reaching out because they have an issue or a problem or a question. So having people in house that not only have the professional experience from major companies, but also realize the value of that white glove customer service and combining the two is, I think, one of the things that separates us from other companies out there, being there when they need us.
Hmm. So there's still this, possibility for sort of a team to some degree.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. And how does that sort of work? Are there some artists that sort of that has extra relevance in your platform and get like personal connections over time? Like, how does that dynamic work for an artist that wants to work with Intercept?
It works great. I mean, there's transparency from day one. So, once we start talking about a deal, we outline the services we provide and what can we actually do for them and with them. That relationship is established from the beginning. And from that point on, it's just a matter of, letting us know what's needed. A lot of times we have label partners that just want to use us for our pipes and have everything else in house, which is fine. We can work that way. Other times there's artists that, really need the help with their profiles and that white glove service and doing audits on their YouTube and other platforms where they need our help, social media wise as well. And we do that for them. So we have weekly calls with them if they need it. We stay away if they need us to as well and let them do their thing. Whatever works best. We want to succeed. We want to see them grow, and whatever path they need to do to get to that point is what we do.
And what's the selection process of doing this? Like, can anyone apply? Like, how do you get it onboarded into your system?
Yeah, I mean, they can reach out to us via our website, interceptmusic.com, or they can reach out to me directly. I'm available with my emails, jesse.flores@interceptmusic.com. And we just have a conversation. No deal is too big or too small to discuss. Ideally, we would like to have an artist or a label that has a commercial fan base, has content that's already out there available to stream or download. And we could figure out what deal terms to go with going forward. We customize our deals, and there's no cookie cutter action going on here. We customize our deals to what our client needs.
So this, sort of hybrid model in between a distributor, a label, an agency. Do you believe that's a sort of a category that is growing and becoming a thing? Like, where do you see this moving? And obviously, you were early movers in this space, but like, where's this heading from a macro
I
perspective?
definitely think it's growing. It's funny because when I was at EMI Music 20 years ago, we were on the forefront of providing third party distribution deals to independent artists. Majors weren't really doing it at the time. And you look at it now, and pretty much every major has a independent distributor or some type of incubator within their system, and it's not going anywhere. Obviously, independent music is on the rise, and it's just amazing to see what it's become over the past 2 decades. So I agree with you 100%. It's definitely a thing that's gonna continue to grow over the years and see a lot of success.
Hmm. But one of the big differences that make you stand out for the Orchards or Virgin Music Group as such is, as I understand it, you have a much more hands-on approach, or at least more accessible. Like these independent distributors are still very large and really service a lot of companies. So getting that personal relationship and that actual help is possible, but less common. Like, what's your positioning in that whole movement of, well, movement, 15 years, it's been, like, evident, but that whole category of, music distributors and agencies?
Yeah, I think we fit in right between that niche of like a distro kid in the Orchard or a Virgin Music Group, where we can provide services for you. We provide a lot of tools and analytics within our dashboard that can help you. We have AI incorporated within our dashboard. So, say you're an artist and you don't have a publicist, but you need a bio or a press release for your next album or single. All that can be generated within a dashboard. We have a merch integration within our dashboard via Shopify. We also can have the ability to, book advertising or social media promotion within the dashboard as well. So there's all these different tools that we're actively adding to our console to help artists that are independent, you know, take them to the next level, expose their music, create awareness, and just marketing in general. I think that helps us, separate us from the rest. As I mentioned before, our staff, I think, is amazing. We have people with that major label experience within our company, and we're growing on a global level as well. So not only just US and Latin America, but we're expanding to other territories as well. So all these things combined, along with kind of focusing on what we want to, do in the future, the very near future, which is lean more into sync and licensing, publishing, and also catalog acquisition. So those different areas of the business, even though distribution is still our core business, we're expanding into other areas, which will help increase our offering as well.
Interesting. So why does that sort of relate to your focus area of independent music? For example, buying catalogs. Where's the synergy between those steps?
Well, when it comes to buying catalogs, the seller is usually independent. They own the rights, they have the master rights, and they're just looking to either sell and get some money up front, or maybe even license it off for like a 10-year period and get the masters back. Whatever the need is, it's an opportunity for an independent rights owner to sell their catalog to a company that's going to help market and expand what they're already doing with their catalog. So when we purchase a catalog, we're going to obviously add it for distribution rights, but also look for ways to enhance that catalog and grow it. It might be earning 100,000 per year over the last 4 or 5 years. Well, how do we get that to 150 or 20 or 200,000? It's a way of figuring out if it's the right fit, and two, what we can do to really take it to the next level and make it beneficial for all parties involved.
Mm. So back to sort of the odds question of me 15 years ago. Assuming I have a bit of budget and I get started, I promote my music, and there's some sort of traction. Like, what is the reasons for me to stay independent? I touched about this like 10 minutes ago when I asked these questions, but like, what do you believe are the biggest reasons, if you want to get really into practical, of staying independent, have creative control, and that's the path you take versus trying to look for the bigger deals where you might sign off a lot of what you own and have,
Mhm.
but it's a different type of machinery.
It's really about having that ownership and creative control. I mean, those are the two main things that you want. You don't want to have anybody telling you what to do, how to formulate your career, telling you what you need to invest in or what you need to pick as your right single or what sound you need to have, what image you need to have. It really depends on what kind of artist you are. If you're really strong about those things and feel like you need to have control over that, then independent is definitely the way to go.
And the ownership, you mentioned, for example, catalog acquisition. When you say ownership and creative control, how do you separate those? Is the ownership like the ownership of the income, or like what's the most important thing in that statement?
Yeah, so the ownership is in reference to the ownership of the masters. So the ownership of the actual content you create. When you're independent, you can license that or you have the final say or sign off on what anybody is with that music. If you're signed to a major label and they have the ownership, then they make those decisions for you, and you just get a piece of it. Also, if obviously if you're independent, then you have full ownership, then you get the lion's share of the royalties that come in, which is a huge plus because it's flipped when you're signed to a major label. You only get a small percentage.
Mm. So obviously there's the higher risk of carrying this yourself, perhaps, but then the return can also be better. Like one of the things about major labels and how they function, generally speaking, is that they take a lot of bets. So invest in a lot of cases, only a few of them really pay back. So to some degree, the winners are the artists that were bet on in, at least the pursuit or the pursuit of it. So if you want to use that math, like it is inherently more risky to do the path yourself. Do you still believe that's worth it at scale?
I do think it's worth it if you're serious about it. You want to make this career, and you're determined to really stick with it. If you believe in yourself, and I think you have a good team around you too. That's another critical thing, is having the right people around you that you trust and that believe in you as well. Then the sky's the limit.
Amazing. Okay. What is it the thing that Intercept sees as the future in music? Obviously, you're pursuing a business model and you have a special segment you're focusing on, but beyond that, like what is it you see that's happening in the industry that makes you take this decision to pursue this business and this industry and this segment? Like from a long, long perspective, what are you chasing or what do you think is happening?
I think a lot of it has to do with desire for all artists, established or developing, wanting to be independent and seeing the value of it, seeing the proof of concept out there that, I can be independent, I could still be a big star, and I could do things the way I wanted to do, and have that type of success that I want. I think that's a big part of it, and knowing that we're a service provider for them that can help them take them to that next level, help them with that journey, and all of us, can be successful and celebrate this a year from now. When we have a deal and we sign it, we always tell them, a year from now, these are the goals we want to achieve. And ideally we want to be celebrating this, um, you know, 365 days from the minute you sign this contract, because our goal is to help you take your career to new heights, and ideally with what we can do, what you can do creatively and musically, this is definitely a possibility.
Jesse, thank you for your perspective. I think it's interesting to think about independence, and I still sit, left with somewhat of a skepticism to the risk versus the opportunity. But that's because I'm a math guy, and I always think of statistics rather than actual individual cases, and that's how I always put my brain. But I do agree to the notion that if you take yourself seriously, if you believe in yourself, if you here to be here for a while with a team that believes so as well, like that independence might really pay itself back. That it might not, but again, the chances of if you succeed, then most likely you're going to be quite happy by having that independence. So I think that's beautiful. It makes sense, and I agree that this is where it's moving. One of the biggest comment is if I 15 years ago had the opportunity to understand what tools to use and how to actually use them, I would have done that. Like I was trying to set up Facebook pixels. I don't know how long ago, maybe 12 years ago, and try to understand that whole thing, which obviously was super, super complicated. And I obviously learned a lot about that and that I've used in my professional career afterwards. But directly as an artist, trying to use 50 hours how to understand how to set up advertising that I didn't really have a budget for
Mhm.
anyways, is maybe not where you should and could use your energy when there's other ways to more proactively work within your career. So that makes sense for me. And I'm looking forward to a generation of creators and artists that maybe has the same business savviness that I had and still have, and can instead of using their whole time to dedicate themselves of how to actually do this, then do it naturally through what's
Mhm.
available, and focus on their music and has that as a natural part of what they do. Maybe one last question is before we sort of end this interview, what type of artist do you believe is going to win the independent race in the future? Like, what are the personalities and capabilities that you believe will be the most important moving forward?
That's a great question. When I think of an artist that I would want to work with, and I think that's going to be successful going forward, obviously they're super creative and talented, and just have that natural raw talent that you say, okay, they can sing, they can rap. There's no question about that. However, if they also have that business acumen, because that's what you really need to be successful going forward, is knowing that this is a business. Things are always constantly changing and evolving, and you need to learn and be a sponge, and really look at all the trades every day and kind of read what's going on, or go to these conferences that I mentioned before, and just kind of being out there with the community as well, networking, knowing who else is out there, who's your competition. being on top of that, having that team around you, and constantly making sure that, everyone is fully engaged on what the goals are that you set, those are the ones that are gonna win. They gotta be business savvy as well as super creative and wanting to learn and be that sponge, like I said, and just be open to realizing what this music industry is going forward, what new platforms might come around, being involved with that, and just saying yes more than no.
That makes sense. And, I wish this was here when I was 18 and I did this because I did put in a real effort. And honestly, that's what I wanted to do amongst other things. But I was really serious about it. But I didn't have the infrastructure around me to do so. And I think it's definitely not a sorrow today, but I believe that the outcome might have been different. Like I was talented, I was savvy, I did put in the time, but I didn't know anyone, and I did everything myself. And at the end of the day, I chase different pursuits, but I think that might have been different if I didn't have that many boundaries and that many hurdles. I actually do think that I would had my own path of being an artist, which today I'm happy that I didn't because I've had other interests and then maybe that aligns more with my long term vision. But that would have been great for me that time. So I appreciate the industry changing like that. I appreciate you guys pursuing that opportunity because I would have been very happy to have that opportunity 15 years ago. Jesse, thank you for entertaining this kind of different Sound Connections podcast episode where we went a bit more practical, a bit more artist centric than I usually do. But I do think it was an important clarification for me and hopefully also for listeners that might have the same questions.
And thank you for having me. I had a great time. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Jacob.
Thanks, Jesse.